Hello, everyone. So, I was 25 years old. I was on a U.S. Navy ship in the middle of the South China Sea. And the ship that I was on was an oiler, which is like a gas station for the Navy, right? So other ships would come up alongside of us, and then we would pass fuel from our ship to their ship and give them an underway replenishment. And typically when we did that, we'd have one ship on this side and one ship on this side, and we'd be traveling at about 80 knots, which is clipping along. So this one time, we were doing an underway replenishment, and we had, I believe it was an aircraft carrier on our left or aft side, and they were connected, so they were underway replenishing, the fuel was going back and forth. And then we had the USS Chancellorville pull up onto the right, and we were about ready to connect with them. And so my job was, at the time I was in telecommunications, and my job was to watch this line that went from ship to ship that had these little flags every 10 feet, and to communicate to the captain how far apart the two ships were, okay? So the average distance between two ships in an underway replenishment is about 150 to 200 feet. So now imagine these three giant ships clipping along 18 knots, and we're about 150 to 200 feet apart. It's not very far. So I was there, I had full garb on in case something went wrong. I had my life vest and I had everything on, and it felt pretty routine because we did this all the time, right? I had my headset on, and I'm watching the ship, and I'm talking to the captain, and I said, "Sir, we're at 180 feet. And there's a guy on the other side that I've been at sea for a bunch of weeks. I'm checking everybody out, right? And so we're chit-chatting, and then I'm like, "Sir, we're at 160 feet. Sir, we're at 150 feet. Sir, we're at 140 feet. It's 130 feet, sir." I'm starting to panic, right? I'm about ready to freak out. And then before I had the chance to give him any more distance, the collision alarms went off. And remember, this is a Navy ship coming at me full force. I have a stanchion that I'm connected to right here. By the time the alarms went off, they had already yelled, "Take cover," to all of us on the ship. So I ran as fast as I could to the other side of the ship, grabbed the stanchion on that side, and held on for dear life while that ship came and just hit us. And on the front of that ship was an anchor that grabbed onto the stanchion that I was standing next to and pulled that stanchion off. And when it happened, the ships went like this, right? They're coming in. And as soon as it happened, then it went like that. And they had already done an emergency breakaway on the left-hand side, but on this side of the ship, it went like this, and then it went like this and hit us again, and it went back, and then it hit us again, and then it went back, and it hit us a fourth time. So it hit us 4 times. And we're in the middle of the South China Sea, and we are 3 days from any port at best. And we had a hole in the side of the ship that was about 12 feet long by about 5 feet high, and I'm not exaggerating. And it was above the water line, but we also had some damage below the water line. And it wasn't, I'm thinking about, I've got 2 little kids at home, I'm thinking we're gonna go down, it just was unbearable and probably the scariest thing that ever happened to me in my life. So then the second scariest thing happened, and the captain came to me, and about 2 weeks prior to this event happening, the person that I reported to had to go back to the States for emergency leave. So I was in charge of the telecommunications shack. The 25-year-old girl from West Michigan is in charge on a ship of 200 people of keeping telecommunications up, right? And the captain said to me, "I know you're alone. I know you don't know how to do it, but I need you to set up a circuit to go from the ship to the helicopter," because we didn't have a landing pad. So they were going to hover over our ship while we're all clipping along, right? And drop a guy down on our ship. And to me, it just sounds like the most horrible thing possible. I had no idea how to do it. I didn't know how to set up a circuit like this. I'd never done it. I had no experience at all, right? But the Navy and the military in general has a strategy, right? And they have plans to support their strategy. And one of their plans is to make sure that wherever a sailor goes, sailor, soldier, airman, wherever they go, they can plop them down and they can follow the right set of procedures to move forward the strategy of the Navy. So I went into the Radio Shack immediately, went up to the shelf where there are a series of books, pulled up the standard operating procedures, laid it out, and studied, and studied, and studied, and studied. And then with those standard operating procedures, which are very detailed and support the strategy of the Navy, I was able to train everyone on the staff so that we could set up a telecommunications channel from the ship to the helicopter. The guy got on board and nobody died, right? So why do I tell you a story like that? Because having a strategy that sets you up for success and having a set of planning and initiatives and programs that support that strategy, that's what's going to get you to success in your marketplace. So a little bit about myself. As you heard, I was in the Navy for about 10 years. And then after I got out of the Navy, I was in the pharmaceutical industry. So the Navy is very structured and disciplined, and the pharmaceutical industry is, because it's regulated, is very structured and disciplined. And I learned lean manufacturing, Six Sigma, lean. I started my law firm after all of that. And what do? I start a law firm and set it up like every other law firm. So I met with a couple of attorneys that had their own law firms. I learned how they ran their practices. I got some mentors. And then I set up my law firm just like them, right? Even with all that experience and training, I went and did what everybody else did for about 2 years. And I almost quit because I wasn't making any money and I was running in circles. So after about 2 years, I got Clio. So I got Clio Grow and Clio Manage and just really buttoned it up so that I could run it like a lean manufacturing organization. So I practiced lean law. And as soon as I did that, my revenue went up, my profit went up, my costs went down. I work 4 days at most a week. I don't work evenings, I don't work Fridays, and I don't work weekends. So, and I did that because I have a strategy that supports that and a plan to implement my strategy. All right. So what we're going to talk about today is how to separate a good strategy from a bad, and we are going to put together a strategy for your firm. And you have a handout, and in that handout, there are two sets of things you can do in your handout. One, as we're going through how to develop a strategy, you can take notes, you can answer some of the questions that I'm going to help you ask yourself. And then at the second part of it is how do you actually put together your plan, okay? And then how do you get your team around it? And then finally, how do you create an actionable plan that ensures you hit your targets? So I am an avid reader. I read for fun and I read for business. And if I'm not doing an Audible, I'm reading a book all the time. There is an author, Roger L. Martin, that wrote Playing to Win. If you haven't read it, read it or listen to it on Audible. It is a fantastic book. And he partnered with Procter & Gamble and helped them develop their new strategy that kind of changed the marketplace a few years ago. So he's got a newer one that's called The Way to Think. Halfway through that one, so I can't comment on that yet, but Playing to Win is very good. And I'm going to suggest to you, so today was called strategic planning, I think. And I'm going to say, let's take those two terms and break them down, okay? So we're going to talk about strategy separately, and then we're going to talk about planning. Okay, strategy. So with Playing to Win, they talk all about this in Playing to Win, but this is my version of it. If you're building your strategy, you want to ask yourself 5 questions, okay? And those 5 questions are, number 1, what does winning look like to you? Not what does it look like to the guy down the street or to your spouse or to your dog or whatever. What does winning look like to you? Because not everybody has the same definition of winning, right? For some people, it's money. Some people, it's freedom, right? But everybody has their own thing that they're looking for. So define what winning looks like to you. Maybe there's a revenue number that you're looking for or a profit number. So you got to define that. And I'll give you some examples in just a little bit. Where are you going to play to win? Are you someone that wants to play locally? Or do you want to play statewide? Do you want to play nationwide, globally? Where are you going to play? It just depends on your practice area. If you're trademarks, it's going to be broad. If you're family law, it's probably going to be narrow. But where do you want to play to win? How are you going to operate so that you can win? This one is a good question because this is about differentiation, right? So what is it that differentiates your firm from the firm down the street if somebody's getting on Google and looking for a family law attorney? What is it that differentiates you? Think about this when you're thinking about differentiation. I think this is a good way to think about it. What do clients, potential clients, complain about as it relates to lawyers, right? Like, what do people hate about lawyers? Can somebody tell me one thing that people hate about lawyers? They never return my call. Hate that. What else? What do they hate about us? One more time? They're so expensive. I never know what's going to be in my bill. What is this charge for? I never talked to you last Tuesday. What are you talking about? Right? That's what they hate about us. Something else? Anything? You only tell me the bad news. That's because you're awful and there's only bad news. But what else? One more time? They talk down to them. You think you're so smart with all that school, right? I mean, these are things that you can differentiate yourself by answering those questions in your marketing to potential clients, or setting up processes and procedures that answer those questions and solve those problems for potential clients, right? So if you are the person that always has an answer for them before they even ask it, you've differentiated yourself from lawyer B down the street, right? If you are the person that tells them exactly how much their case is going to cost before you even start, you've differentiated yourself from somebody down the street. And those are some questions, you guys, but think about in your practice area, what are the things that people hate about lawyers like you, right? Because they hate us. I don't understand that, but they hate us. Well, I do. And then what capabilities must we in our firm have to operate the way you want so that you can play in your marketplace so that you can have your winning aspiration? What capabilities do you need to work as trademark lawyer? You need education, you need training, you need experience, you need a mentor, you need all those things. What do you have? What kind of capabilities do you need for family law? You need to know the court rules, you need to know this, criminal law, court rules, this, that. Think about those capabilities that your team needs, right? And then what systems do you need to have in place? So you need to have a tech stack. That's why we're all here, right? So I'll show you my tech stack in just a minute. But then you also need to have an operations plan. You have to have a financial plan. You need to have a marketing plan. You need to have standard operating procedures so the guy can land from the helicopter. You got to have all these things in place. Those are your systems so that you can build and maintain those capabilities so that you can reinforce how you're going to win, your differentiation, so that you can practice in your chosen location and so you can have your winning aspiration. So I'm going to go back to winning aspiration for 1 minute, and I want to talk about, we could spend an hour talking about what is winning. Maybe you aren't the one that can decide what is winning. Now, if you're a firm owner, it's your ultimate decision to decide what winning means, right? But let's say that I'll suggest to you that you have stakeholders in your life that can help you decide what winning is. And those stakeholders are any person that either gains from your success or loses from your failure. So I would suggest those people are your partners, if you have partners in your law firm, your employees, your children, your parents, your neighbors, your friends, your kids, everybody. Anybody that either gains from your success or loses from your failure, those people all can help you decide what winning means to you. For me, I want to go on a cruise at least twice a year. That's winning. All right, so we talked about, before I get too much into this example, I want to talk about how you're asking questions about your firm. And that's at the high level, right? So the firm owner has to ask those questions to determine what your strategy would look like. But I'll also say you should take those questions down to each level of the organization, right? So your paralegal is winning if she can work remotely, if she's making enough money, a living wage, if she can take her kids to soccer, if she can, whatever those questions are. But you need to work with the different levels of your organization. So each person is asking those same questions to support the overall firm strategy. So you ask yourself those questions, but every other person in your organization should also be able to answer those questions that support up to the main strategy, right? So here's an example for Woznicki Law, my law firm. So for me, winning is not going to court. I don't like court. I don't like litigation. I don't want any part of it. Public speaking, bring it on, right? But I'm in family law. There's no winning in family law. Nobody wins. When people come to me and they say, what's your win rate? I'm like, win rate? Everybody loses. All of my clients lose, right? So I'm not interested in talking about whether John had an affair with so-and-so. I understand I need to know that, but I don't want to bring all those facts up in court. I just don't want to do it, right? So I'm winning when I'm not in court. I want clients who also don't want to go to court. That's winning for me. So I want clients that don't want to fight. If they come to me and they say, I want to take them to the cleaners, or I don't ever want John to have any parenting time, I'm out. I'm not doing that, right? I want clients that have a settlement mindset. I want people that think about settling. In Michigan, in my county, and the 3 counties around me, less than 1% of all divorce cases are heard by a judge. Less than 1%. That means all the other cases are settling. So why fight? You're going to settle anyway. I mean, why not start with a settlement focus, right? I have a revenue target. I want to make a certain amount of money so that I can take those 2 cruises per year. So for me, let's just say it's $1 million. So I'm winning when I have $1 million. Let's talk about where. For me to win, I need to, because I don't want to go to court, I have to have a virtual or semi-virtual practice, right? I need to practice in jurisdictions that are uncomplicated. I don't want somebody who needs extra forms that are not required by the court rules. I don't want a jurisdiction where they're going to send my forms back if there's a mistake. I want to know them so they don't do that. And finally, I want someone where I can predict what the judges are going to rule, like how they're going to rule. I want to know that I know that judge and he always awards spousal support. Or I want to know that judge and he always rules, or almost always rules this way, right? So I want to make sure that it's predictable. For me and house, let's talk about my house. I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on this one with you because I think this is kind of where the money is. But transparent fees. So when someone calls me and I do an initial consultation with them, they're going to know at the end of the call approximately pretty darn close what their final fee is going to be. So, and I'll charge anywhere from, if they don't have any children and they don't have any property and there's nothing really at risk, that might be like $3,000 just to get them from filing to a certain stage, right? All the way up to $25,000. If they have $1 million in assets, I'm certainly not going to charge them $3,000 because there's a lot of risk there. So I charge based on the complexity of the case, how likely it is that we're going to get to from A to B, and it's transparent and they know it on day one. So in my representation agreement, it actually says your flat fee for legal services is X and is due immediately. And I know every jurisdiction has the rules about, taking flat fees and whether they're refundable. So you'd have to check with your ethics rules, of course. But they know with me, it's going to cost X and it's going to get them from stage 0 to stage 4, right? And I'll talk about stages in a minute. So for me to win, that's how I have to play. And to do that, I have to be collaborative. I have to be collaborative all the time. So I have to practice law in a collaborative manner, and I have training to be able to do that. Case stages, just like Clio has stages, my firm has stages, and they're very regimented. We'll walk through exactly what they look like in just a minute, but you must use case stages to be able to bill flat fees for family law. People say I'm crazy, and I'm telling you, you can do it. And then communication. So someone over here said that one of the biggest complaints that people have is their lawyer doesn't talk to them. Well, I'll tell you, people don't say that about me, because I have a series of pre-recorded videos that I made on loom.com. If you haven't used Loom, check it out. It's great. That answer all the questions that they might have about a divorce case, right? So if they have a pretrial hearing coming up, 10 days prior to their pretrial hearing, they get a pre-recorded message from me about their pretrial hearing, what to expect, what they're going to do there. It's not a decision maker, blah, 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 everything about a pretrial hearing. So they don't call me. They don't ask me about a pretrial hearing because I told them about it. And I make it generic enough that I can use it for every case, but specific enough that they feel like I'm talking to them. Okay? So it's not an impersonal practice. I'm very personal with my clients and I get good reviews from them, but it's the only way that I can automate my practice is to have these pre-established videos that are automated through my process, right? Capabilities that my team needs, they ought to be lean thinkers, right? Lean service in the military, lean service in the pharmaceutical industry, and lean law. If you haven't read any books about lean law, there's some really good ones. The ABA has a really good one on their website. I think it's just called Lean Law. I think it's Lean Law Practice or something, Lean Practice, something like that. But you got to think lean. So you want to remove waste, remove operational waste from your processes so you can have more profit, because profit's the key, right? So I need skilled staff. So they have to be tech savvy, because a lot of stuff we do uses a lot of legal tech. And we need training on practice area and court rules every year. Systems I have in place, lean. And if you haven't ever studied lean, it's that process of continuous improvement, right? So it's a circle process. So you define a problem, you analyze the problem, you fix the problem, you analyze the fix, you make changes, you identify if it's working, and you keep going in a circle. That's lean, right? And that was founded back with the automotive industry with Toyota. Okay, so we're going to dig into each one of these just a little bit deeper, and then we're going to start talking about how to put together your ops plan. So winning strategy for me, how is it possible that I get these people that are reasonable? Because that's the hardest thing in family law. How do you get reasonable clients? Targeted marketing to reasonable people through word choices, right? Detailed screening process. So we screen those people out that want to fight, and we tell them on the first call, we're a different kind of law firm. We do things differently. We don't like to fight. We try to get you through it. Less than 1%. We tell them all those things, provide that education, have it on our website, and all of that. And then winning, anytime I tell people, well, you want to make $1 million, it's really not that far of a stretch to make $1 million. All you would need is an average case value of $10,000, right? Average case value of $10,000 times 45 weeks times 2.2 new cases. So if your average case value could be about 10 grand and you got 2 new cases each week, which is not impossible, you can make $1 million. I promise. All right. Again, strategy for me, virtual, uncomplicated, predictable. I'll tell you, if you want to make sure that your system is uncomplicated, the way to do that is to study your jurisdiction. Get to know the people at the court, understand the people that take your paperwork, and find out what they need and want from you, and know their first name. Because if you've gone and you've met them, then you know how to make it not complicated. I'll talk about this one. My how is really important. So how is all about charting out your processes. If you've never charted out your processes at your firm, that's probably the first thing you need to do when you get back to the office, is get a big piece of paper little piece of paper, use a program. Visio is really great for it, Microsoft Visio. And you can use Visio free online if you use the online Microsoft. And I believe Google Suite also has a charting program. So chart out your processes. Start with it on paper, put it on your computer from point A to end of case. So as soon as someone hires you until the time the case is over, you should have a chart of everything that happens, right? I'll show you that in just a second. But chart it out, and then you can assign your stages, and then you can assign task lists to the stages, and then you can figure out how to bill by stage, right? And then develop a client communications plan. Nobody calls me, ever. My clients don't call me because I have a paid service that I use. And if they call me, they're never going to put them through because they've been instructed never to put people through. I don't even let the court staff get put through. So nobody gets put through. I just believe that I'm busy working on other things. And if they interrupt me, then I can't be a good lawyer on this particular situation, right? So here is the breakdown of stages. And when I say stages, I want you to think about, if you have Clio right now, think about Clio stages. And then I also want you to think about task lists associated with stages. So I am a Clio consultant, and this is one of the first things I do with people when I work with their firms. So draw out your processes start to finish. Let's talk about a standard divorce, okay? So we're just going to kind of go through it. But think about your area of law. So if your area of law is business, think about what happens from the moment they hire you until you're done, right? So whatever area of law, put your area of law in this. Okay, so new hire to pretrial conference. So that would be you do your intake. So you brought all your stuff in and grow. You moved it over into manage. You've done all of your documents. You've filed the documents with the court. You've served the other party. They file a responsive pleading, and then you have a pretrial conference. Pause, right? Pause. There's a natural pause. That's a stage. So whenever you're doing anything in your law firm and you feel that something's coming next, but something just finished, that's a natural pause. And that's a perfect place for you to assign a stage, right? And if you think about that, in task lists in Clio, now you have a small section of the entire flowchart that you can assign a task list to. So they're in initiation stage, and I actually call it that. We need to assign initiation task list. And a series of tasks are in there that are all timed out based on when things need to be done at the firm. Okay? So the next thing, discovery. So right after the pretrial, you're gathering information. You're sending out subpoenas. You're exchanging with the other attorney. Then, pause, right? So that's a natural stage that you can call a stage, create a task list that goes around it, and bill by that stage. Third one, negotiations. Now you're starting to send offers back and forth. You are kind of getting the offers going. And then the next thing is mediation. And then after mediation, again, you feel that natural pause, right? And that's where my representation ends. So I'm done. I mean, I got a little bit more. I do a little bit of finalization, but pretty much that's it. So my rep agreement says I will represent you stage 1 through 4. And if for some reason you don't settle, I have a referral list for you. Okay? So you could technically bill $20,000 to get from new hire to post closure, post mediation, 20 grand, and you could do it 5, 5, 5, 5. Or you could do 3, 3, 3, 3, depending upon the risk. And you have it in your rep agreement that if they don't pay you for stage 2 or stage 3, then you withdraw. You have it in your rep agreement, right? So it's easy. And people say you can't do it for family law. You can. I'm telling you, you can. Okay, capabilities for my firm, lean thinkers, skilled staff. We know that. And then systems. You need your standard operating procedures, financial plan, marketing plan. I did want to tell you that I have some samples of a financial plan. It's an Excel spreadsheet that you can put in all of your expected sales. You can put in all of your expected expenses. And then you can put in your actuals, and it'll give you a plan to actual performance on it. And I'll have that on my website about a day or two after the conference. So There'll be a QR code at the end, but you'll be able to get those documents from me too. And then I have a sample marketing plan as well, just a sample. I am not a financial expert and I am not a marketing expert, but I am an operations expert, so that's where we're going to spend some time. Here's what my tech stack looks like. So I use Microsoft products. I've got Lytics for my website, though I did see a really good person out there today that I may be talking with. And then I do Google Ads for advertising. I use Dialpad as my voice over IP, which integrates perfectly with Clio. I use Calendly for scheduling, but I'm going to tell you that Clio Grow's scheduling platform has improved very significantly in the recent past. So if you don't have a scheduling program, I recommend Clio Grow's scheduling program. I use Clio Grow, Clio Manage, QuickBooks Online, and then online banking. So that's what my stack looks like, but you should be evaluating your stack all the time and see if maybe next year is the time that you want to invest in new technology. So what I like about the strategy that we just talked about, how I built, it also goes nicely into a mission statement, okay? So my mission statement, it takes all those things I talked about, and it's Woznicki Law is a semi-virtual law firm that helps divorcing couples stay out of court, understand legal fees, and come to an amicable, fair settlement, winning, right? In Southwest Michigan, where by offering a collaborative legal approach with transparent flat fee pricing, and then we help clients keep the peace in their family during divorce. So you can quickly take that and turn it into a mission statement. Okay, so you have to align your team around your new plan or your new strategy, right? And to do that, you're going to have your financial plan, your marketing plan, your ops plan, and your legal tech. So how do you build a plan? How do you build an ops plan? Ops is the most important part of your firm. You need sales, you need marketing, you need all that. But without an ops plan, you can have $10 million of revenue coming in. But if you're not lean and you don't have a solid plan of what you're going to do with it, that's all going to go in somebody else's pocket, and you want it to go in your pocket, and you and your employee's pocket, right? So 5 parts of creating a solid ops plan. 1, know your current performance, know where you're at year to date. Where are you? 2, you're going to bring back that strategy that you just created so that you're always looking at that when you're building your ops plan. You're going to actually build the plan. You want to bring your team into alignment around it, and then you're going to monitor progress and adjust the plan. That's the most important part. Okay, so I talked about looking at your current performance. So there's a lot of different ways to look at current performance. You can do a gap analysis. That is, where are you today compared to where you said you were going to be today? So there's that gap between those two numbers. Really important to understand why that gap happened. And there's a couple different places you can get that gap information. One, right on Clio, right on the dashboard, you can see where your goals were and where you are to those goals. Hopefully you're up here, right? And then the other thing is you can do a SWOT analysis. And a SWOT analysis is looking at your strengths. And when you think about your strengths, you want to think, what strengths does my firm have today? And what could happen to those strengths tomorrow? So today you have a killer paralegal that really performs for you, right? But they're in law school, and next year they might be an attorney, and they may or may not stick around, right? So know your strengths today, and then know how they could evolve. Weaknesses, what are deficiencies in your firm? Do you have someone that maybe is an underperformer? Do you have someone that needs a little bit more training, or maybe they need to be replaced? Those are things you need to think about for next year. What are the opportunities in your marketplace, in your chosen marketplace? Are there new innovations in legal tech that are coming around the corner? I bet you can find some today, tomorrow. Do you want to maybe go into a new segment? Or do you want to take your current segment and niche down? Sometimes bigger isn't always better. Sometimes it's better to niche down just a little bit. And then threats. What kind of threats do you have out there? Is there a guy down the street that's doing the same thing you're doing? How are you going to market against that? Is there somebody else that's coming in? How do you want to make the change so you can meet your winning aspiration? So the important thing to think about current performance is you can do your SWOT analysis, You can do your gap analysis. You can look at your numbers today, where you are year to date, but don't overthink it. Don't get so caught up in past performance that you can't think about future capabilities and aspirations. And I think people do that. Well, last year I only made $250,000. So how can I possibly make $1 million? Well, plan for it, right? The past does not equal the future. So if you made $250,000 last year, what are you going to do to make $1 million? You're going to do this, right? Don't overthink it. Okay, so the first step was your current performance. Second step is bring your strategy back into the game. Make sure everything that you're doing as you build your plan revolves around your strategy. If it doesn't revolve around your strategy, nix it. Get it out. I can give you an example. When I first started in family law, and remember, I'm a different attorney. I started later in life, right? I didn't know anybody. Everyone assumed because I was a little bit older that I was really experienced, right? So experienced. Well, I wasn't, and I needed to get to know the judges, and I needed to get to know the court staff. So I signed up for the county's abuse and neglect work, right? And I did that for a few years, and I'll tell you, first of all, it's the hardest work I've ever done. It's awful. It's surprising to me how many people in my own community are suffering like that. But it wasn't profitable. I think they paid me $50 to go to a hearing, and it was heart-wrenching, and I would cry. I'd get out of court and cry and meet with a kid that, had issues. And it just, although it was important work and it was important for me at that time, it didn't fit in my new strategy. So I had to let it go. And honestly, for me, it was good to let it go. It was time. And there are younger, newer attorneys that need that experience that are coming into the community all the time. So it was good at the time, but you have to make decisions when to cut bait on something. So if you're doing something that isn't in alignment with your current strategy, don't do it anymore. Just stop. Okay, building your plan. So this is, because I was in business for 20-something years, sometimes this seems so everybody knows this, but not everybody does know this. So when you're creating goals that address the improvements that you need in your company, they have to be SMART goals. And SMART goals are specific in nature, measurable, attainable, relevant to your strategy, and time-bound. So if your goal for 2024, if you said to me, I want to increase my profit margin next year. Okay, we're missing a bunch of that, right? So you have to tell me how much you want to increase it by. When are you going to do that by, right? So a better goal would be, I want to increase my profit margin by Q2 by 5%. That's a SMART goal, right? Because it's specific, it's measurable, it's attainable, it's relevant, and it's time-bound. And then once you have those goals established, define the deliverables so you'll know when you've reached your goal. Assign timelines to each action so you can make sure that they're time-bound, and then allocate the right people to do the work, okay? So you're going to create an actionable plan and get team alignment around it. So the first thing you should do is put your plan on paper or on your SharePoint site or on your website or wherever it is that you communicate to your team. So draw that strategy graphic out that I gave to you, right? Draw it out. Show everyone what winning means to you. Where you guys are going to play so that you can win. What are the capabilities that you need? How are you going to operate? What systems do you have? Draw that out and put it on the wall. Put it on your screensaver. Put it, in the break room, wherever you need to put it so everybody knows the strategy, and then communicate the new plan that you have for next year so everybody knows it, right? Assign due dates and put them in Clio or put them in Outlook. Make sure everyone understands the due dates for all of the new goals that you've established. And this is one of my favorite ones, create incentives for milestones or achievements. And I promise you, your team does not want a pizza party, okay? They don't want a pizza party. Well, they do want a pizza party, but they want a pizza party because they want it for lunch, not because they did something great. So think about what people want, right? What do they want for performance? What do people want? Money. What else? Time off. What else? Recognition. What else? Casey, my assistant. What else, Casey? Maybe a massage? Yeah, let me tell you. So find out what your team wants for performance. And I'm going to give you an example about Miss Casey. So she loves it when I talk about her. So I think it was January or February of this year. I was missing a few numbers. You know, I'm constantly looking at my numbers, so I was missing my numbers on sales. And I just wasn't getting that lead conversion. I had leads coming in, but because of Christine, she does my marketing. But I had leads coming in, but I wasn't converting them to sales, and I just couldn't figure it out. Well, the first problem was I was the one doing the calls. That's a disaster. So the first call should never be by the attorney, right? I was doing all the first calls. And I'm too busy. You know, I'm in court, and whether I want to be in court or not, I'm in court, I'm in mediation, I'm negotiating with clients, I'm working on client files, I'm doing other work. I don't have time to talk to someone who may or may not hire me. I just don't have that time. So Casey took that job over, right? And I think she was at it a few weeks, and it was new for her, so she was, doing okay, right? And then I said, I'll tell you what, every time you turn one of those calls into a paid consult with me, she does a 15-minute free call, and then I do a 1-hour paid Zoom meeting, not in person. So as soon as she heard me, I said to her, Casey, every time you convert somebody to a paid call with me, I'll give you $50 cash, right? Oh my word. My sales numbers just went like that. So she's converting. I look at the calendar, and this was like 3 days after I gave her the new initiative, and I've got paid call, paid call, paid call. I'm like, either she's splitting the money with them or something's going on, because I got quite a few paid calls right after we implemented that. But know what people want. And if you don't know what they want, it's not pizza. They want pizza, but not for this. Ask them. So do employee surveys. Find out what your team wants, what motivates them to perform, and then give them what they want, right? So that's my incentive speech. You love that, Casey? And then the next thing you need to do is set up a system for tracking your progress. So if you think about going back to the strategy sheet that I showed you with all the stuff on it, for each one of those things that you think you want to improve, like for me, it's no court, right? You have to set up a system for tracking whether or not you're in court. How much time did you have to go to court? That's a KPI, key performance indicator, right? How much time did I actually spend in court with clients? What's my settle rate? I'll tell you my settle rate since COVID started, I've been in-person court 2 times, and I'm a very busy family law attorney, 2 times. So I can measure that one pretty easily. Think about other things like I want to bring peace to families in divorce. That's one of my things, right? How much peace did I actually give them? What did they think about my ability to give them peace? Did they believe that I brought peace to them when they were getting their divorce? Were they happy with me? Did they like how I handled their case? Did they hate those videos I sent them, or did it help them? And the only way to know that is to survey your clients. And you'd want to survey them while the case is ongoing so you can adjust, right? And then finally, at the end, I always send every client a link to give me a Google review, right? And that's risky, right? But it gives you a little bit of street cred if you have a review here and there that's not perfect. I have 2 bad reviews. One is, that lady just wanted me to settle. Yeah, I told you that. That's what I do, right? So yeah, I consider that a favorable review, right? And the other one was, she wouldn't do anything for free. She just wanted my money. Yeah, that's what I do, right? So 2 bad reviews, but in the long run, it gets me some good reviews, and people seem to want to say good things about us because we seem to do good work for them. So figure out what's working, figure out tracking systems to track how you're going to track performance, even when it's a subjective performance, like whether or not someone had peace. You should be able to figure that out through some type of a survey with your clients and with your team as well. And then you should establish regular review meetings to go over your performance. Because if today, we're what, October something? If today is when you look at your performance to see if you met your objectives, you're too late. Because if you're at 250,000 and you were trying to get to 1 million, you're never going to make it at this point. So track it every week, every month, every quarter, or whatever frequency works for your level of business. So it's what is your firm doing and how close are you to plan all the time. Now, if you're exceeding your numbers, you're way over your number, you're not going to have to analyze it quite as much. But if you're close or under, you need to make sure that you look at it frequently enough so that you can monitor your progress and then adjust your plan accordingly. Okay? And again, monitor your key metrics. All right. So we talked about a good strategy versus a bad strategy. And I'll tell you, the bad strategy, there are two ways to look at what a good and bad strategy are, right? A good strategy is one that you have, right? That you've made. You've created a strategy. If you have no strategy, then that's a bad strategy, right? Another way to look at that, and this is what that Roger Martin says, is if you could do the opposite of that strategy and it's stupid, doesn't make sense, it's not a good strategy. Like if I were to say, I want to be the most ethical attorney in town, well, you have to be ethical, right? So the opposite of that is just dumb. I want to be the least ethical lawyer in town. It's dumb. It doesn't make sense, right? So if the opposite of it doesn't make sense, like for me, I say, I don't want to be in court. Well, being in court still makes sense, right? It's just not my strategy. That's how to tell the difference between a good one and a bad one. Ask the opposite question. If it's really dumb, doesn't make sense, that's a bad strategy. But if the other is still a good strategy, it just means it's somebody else's, not yours, right? So you've got your good strategy from a bad one. Get your team engaged around your process and your new plan, and then create an actionable plan that ensures you hit your target. All right, so there's my QR code for the documents that'll be up in a couple of days. I want to remind you that the whole idea here is to implement an operational plan that supports your new winning strategy. But remember that your strategy is different than someone else's, and their plan wouldn't support yours and yours wouldn't support them. So it's about winning for you and what it means in your marketplace. So that's my presentation, but I wanted to ask if anyone has any specific questions about anything I talked about today, because we have some extra time. Anybody? We got a mic over there.
Great presentation.
Hi, what's your name?
Sean Lovern.
Where are you from, Sean?
From Texas, San Antonio.
Hi.
Hi. So how do you handle a client who comes in, say it's the wife, she hires you, and then the husband hires that attorney that's very litigious?
That's happening to me right now.
Okay. So curious, I mean, how do you leverage the cost, right?
Okay.
I've toyed with the flat fee family deal for a long time, but that leverage piece is what's the hang up?
So in my representation, that's a great question for anyone that didn't hear. How do you handle the difficult opposing counsel? Luckily, in my jurisdiction, I know most of the family law attorneys, and most of us are pretty darn good friends, right? But I do have one right now that I'm working on. They may be watching this later, so I'll have to be careful. Without revealing too much confidential information, I do have a case right now where the opposing counsel is very litigious, and they know that I am not, and they know that I charge flat fees, and they know that I'm not going to get paid any more no matter what they do. They know that. They know all of that. And I know that that person is an hourly biller, so she's motivated to litigate, which I'm going to do a little bit of my own personal opinion. A lot of people disagree with me on this, so just bear with me. I feel like hourly billing is a little bit unethical. I know, lawyers hate me when I say that. But I think it's unethical, and here's my reason why. So if you're getting paid because you're filing motions, and you're getting paid that maybe are necessary and maybe are not. And I wouldn't say that any of you would do that because that wouldn't be ethical. But if you're filing motions and you're making sure you get to go to a motion hearing, that's probably going to end up at an evidentiary hearing, that's probably going to end up in a lot of paperwork after the evidentiary hearing, a lot of prep work before the evidentiary hearing, I'm going to say that that's probably not necessary. So in family law, I think that there are only two kinds of cases, maybe three, that need to litigate. One is abuse and neglect. If you've got abuse, if there's child abuse or spousal abuse or anything like that, that might have to litigate, especially if they don't admit that there's a problem. Or if you have a substance abuse problem, that probably is going to have to litigate too, if they don't admit that they have a problem. Those two issues should litigate, but nothing else. Maybe spousal support, maybe. Or maybe you should just admit you have to pay spousal support and pay it. I don't know. But to me, it feels unethical that all you really have to do if you want to talk about spousal support is call me, right? Just call me. And how I head that off to Mr. Texas, Sean, right? How I head that off typically is by calling opposing counsel before they have a chance to file any motions. I just got on a case recently where opposing counsel happens to be a friend of mine. When she filed her pleadings, she filed a motion for temporary spousal support, temporary child support, temporary custody, like 6 different things. As soon as I got hired, I called her. Hey, I saw you filed a motion. Could we settle that out of court before the motion hearing that's scheduled for next week? Thanks. Okay, bye. And guess what? We're going to settle it. And we're going to settle it because I prep my clients really well for what I give them expectations. So they know that, if you make a lot more than this person, you're going to have to pay spousal support, right? I mean, there's no winning in family law. Everybody loses. So you're going to have to pay spousal support. You're going to have to pay child support. The kids are going to go back and forth at some relative frequency. Just know that. And I educate my clients on these things. So if opposing counsel is very argumentative, I call them, I take them to lunch, I go out for coffee, whatever it is I need to do to get them to understand that this is going to settle anyways. Let's just settle it. And I'll tell you, if you look at your caseload, how many of those do you have, right? Every now and again, depends on your jurisdiction. Every now and again, you get a difficult person. Most of the time, everybody can settle everything. So the way I look at it is if I have a case that I took $5,000, only $5,000, because I thought it was going to be an easy case, and now it's not so easy, I might lose my behind on that case, but the next case is the millionaire that gave me $25,000. And I'm going to do the same level of work, right? So I guess it's a give and take. Sometimes when you're flat fee, you make more money, and sometimes it's a little bit of a wash. Other questions?
Right.
That was a loaded one. I like that question.
Hi, I always struggle with the visual look of a strategic plan. You mentioned Visio. I've done them in PowerPoint. Do you have any other tips on how to kind of
I do.
visually create?
What's your name?
Siobhan.
Siobhan, where are you from?
I'm from Michigan originally, on the other side of the state.
I'm right here. How about you? Okay, she's over here. That's what we do.
Yes.
Okay, so different software that you can do flowcharting with. Ready? Visio, there's a free online version. If you go to Microsoft 365 online, you can use Visio for free. You can buy Visio in your plan for $15 a month, I think, if you have a business plan. You can get Lucidchart. You can get Creately, is another software that you can do flowcharts on. Or, and I did this one before at another job that I had, you can get sticky notes and you can put it on the wall and you can chart out your process on the wall with sticky notes. That would be a great workshop because that's actually really powerful because then everybody gets to contribute. People put their own sticky notes up there. You can have different colors. You can turn them in sideways and do all kinds of things with it. You can draw it on paper. If you use PowerPoint mostly, there are some charting things in the, what is it called, word art, I think, in PowerPoint. You have some charts in there, but they're not very powerful. So if you want something more powerful, it'd be like Visio or something like that. And if you're talking about project management, so a lot of people like to put their plan in project management, I would recommend Microsoft Project or a spreadsheet. And if you get online and just Google spreadsheet operational plan or spreadsheet financial plan, you might be able to find a project management spreadsheet template that's out there that has like dependent dates based on formulas and stuff like that. So there's a lot of tools out there. I'm a geek about that kind of stuff, and I'm looking for new stuff all the time. So we have a question over here.
So for a flat fee practice, does it ever make sense to publish your rates, or do you?
I do publish my rates. I have a range on my website, so yeah, I do publish that.
Okay.
What was your name? Stephanie. Where are you from? Seattle. Anybody else?
Hi,
Hi, what's your name?
I'm Drew.
Hi,
Arizona.
Arizona, love it.
How did you come up with your different flat fees? Because I was looking at your website and saw your schedule.
Stalking me. I love that. Okay.
Like that.
That's a great question. How did I come up with my flat fees? So when I first started, mind you, I have a business background, so I think differently than most people that are lawyers. I just went out there and looked to see what was out there. So there are a lot of lawyer websites. If you go out and just look at lawyer websites and search family law, flat fee, price sheet, or family law, blah, 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 whatever, or whatever your area of practice is, people post their fees. There are a lot of people that do. And I just started looking. And then I started testing it, right? So the first thing I did was I tested how much time does it take me to do X case. So we'll use an example. To do a motion to show cause. Motion to show cause, all you're going to do is draft one document. I mean, you got to talk to the client, find out the facts, all that stuff, right? You're going to draft. So you might have an hour meeting with them, drafting the document. If you have all your stuff set up in Clio, should take you about 3 to 5 minutes at the most, right? So do your document. Let's say you don't have a way to do it. An hour max to draft those documents. You got to submit them to the court. You got to pay a motion fee. You got to go prep for the hearing. That's maybe an hour. And then you've got to go to the hearing. And then you got to draft an order at the end of the hearing. Add it up. Add it up. And then let's say that number is, if I'm just going to do that for him on a limited scope basis, I might charge, I usually don't do anything for less than $3,000 anymore. But you could charge less for that, maybe $1,500 if you wanted, depending upon your market, where you're at. I'm in a smaller town, so people don't pay as much for lawyers as they do in a bigger city. You just figure out what works for you. Then, once you've decided what you're going to charge, measure your time, right? Make sure that you're actually making money off that. And then you'll know your profit margin. And then you'll know if you need to raise that rate. Right? So in the beginning, when you start flat fees, you might not be perfect at it, but you'll get better. But let me give you an example that I talked to another attorney about it. So one of my good colleagues, who is an hourly biller, unethical, he actually said to me, my average case value for a divorce is about $8,000. The average cost of a divorce in Michigan is about $16,000 per party. He said he usually ends up billing about $8,000. And then I said, well, what's your collection rate? Oh, about 60%. Are you kidding me? So you're not making $8,000, right? My collection rate is 100% because I collect up front, flat fees, right? So even though he's billing hourly and his collection rate is 60%, he's not making $8,000. I'm making more off my case than he is, and I'm flat fee billing. Anybody else? Can't see you guys.
Hi.
Hi, what's your name?
Ed.
Hi, Ed. Where are you from?
Hi. Portland, Oregon.
Oregon.
Yeah. So you mentioned some tech stack for flowchart software and things like that. Do you recommend any software or tools or reporting tools for things like tracking metrics and KPIs and things like that? I do have Clio Manage, and there is some reporting in there, but I'm looking for something more like, being able to manipulate the data a bit more, be more visual, things like that. Any kind of outside tools?
So that's a good question. Tools for measuring your KPIs. So there is a company here. I don't know if you saw them. KPI. Anybody know the name for sure? Law KPI. So they have programs like that. I don't use them, but I'm kind of an Excel guru, so I like to do it my own way, right? So I like to play around with Excel and look at my KPIs in Excel, but there are programs out there. There's a lot of programs out there. I would say go talk to them and see what they have. And then once you look at them, then you can find out who their competitors are and see if there's someone else that would do that same thing. Oh, geez.
Hi there.
Hi, what's your name?
My name's Josh.
Hi, Josh. Where are you from?
Los Angeles.
Oh, LA.
Yeah. So I came in a little late, so I apologize.
That's okay.
Being a flat fee family law attorney, are you finding opportunity or already practicing taking a lot of your repetitive tasks and giving that kind of down the line to either other employees or admins and things like that? Are you finding yourself sort of using that as like a scaling opportunity, if you will?
So as far as delegation, as a flat fee attorney, delegation's the same, whether you're a flat fee attorney or an hourly attorney, or if you're a solo, right? If you're solo, you're delegating to you, and you better have some solid systems in place so you don't have to do the work. And I don't believe that you should work for your firm. I believe that your firm should work for you. So you should have systems set up so most of the work that needs to happen is automated. So I've spent a lot of time setting up documents that are perfect. And if they're not perfect, in each Word document that I have in Clio as a template, there are drop downs for those things that that you just can't know. If you use LawYaw, there's conditional logic in that. And you can put some conditional logic as well in a regular Word document. But, my assistant, she does all of my documents. She knows what kind of case it is. There's a task list in the initiation phase of my case, and it tells her what to do. So I don't have to tell her what to do on a case. All we have to do is put the task list in there, and the task list tells her what to do. So every morning when we come in, we both go to our dashboard, and up in the top left corner of the dashboard are all the tasks that are due that day, and we just do them. I don't do them. She has to tell me to do them because I'm the boss, and so I just don't do them. But you know how that goes. She has to remind me to do them.
All right, thank you.
Did that help?
Yeah, very much.
It's a good thing I have her. Boy. Anyone else? Any other questions? One over here.
Thanks. My name is Jonathan from Columbus, Ohio.
Hi, Jonathan. You're a neighbor.
Yeah. Question is about whether or not you've done consulting for other small attorneys or small firms in this area, or is this all just stuff that you've done for yourself and then for the presentation?
Okay, great question. Thank you. You're helping me with my marketing. I appreciate you. So yes, I do work for other law firms, and is Mandy in the room? Mandy in here? She's here. So how I started doing consulting, so I am a Clio consultant. I'm a certified Clio consultant. I also do lean operations, so I help people streamline their operations, removing waste and helping them become more profitable. I was running my practice, and I have this social group of attorneys. We get together periodically, and a couple people called and said they can't make it because they have to work. I'm like, you're working, it's 6 p.m., what are you doing? Go home. And one attorney asked me, how is it that you're never working in the evenings? And I said, well, I've got some pretty good systems, and I've got them pretty well buttoned up. And she said, could you show me what you do, how you do that? And I walked her through my systems, and she said, I'll tell you what, I'll pay you X to do that for my firm. I'm like, all right, done, right? So I set up her firm, and she's quite a bit larger firm than I am. Very entrepreneurial thinker, though. And then she introduced me to another firm, and I set up their systems, and then they set me up with another firm. I thought, maybe there's a thing here that I should be doing, right? Looking for those opportunities in my SWOT analysis. I learned that, I need to be doing this more.
Well, my follow-up question on that then is, for any firms you've assisted that have multiple attorneys, multiple different practice areas, what has been the most challenging thing, or some of the most challenging things as far as the strategic development? Because I find that when you have one practice area or one thing you want to be best at, you can have a clear mission, a clear strategy, everybody can get aligned with that. When you grow and expand and add other attorneys with other practice areas, it dilutes the messaging. It becomes a lot harder to have a clear strategy that applies to everybody in the firm. So I'm just curious if you've dealt with that at all.
So I have. So the first firm that I worked with is a family law firm like me. The second firm that I worked with is someone in Tennessee here, and they have family law some criminal law, and a little bit of administrative law, which is a little weird, but they do kind of all three. And you have to have, if it's one firm, you have to have an overall firm strategy, what winning means to the owner of the company, right? Or the senior partners of the company. You have to have that one overarching strategy. And then I would recommend, I worked at a multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical company that had lots of different business areas. It was a generic drug manufacturer that makes stuff like ibuprofen for store brand, right? So they had like pain drugs, they had cold and flu, they had, cough, cold, and flu. They had all these different areas of the company, and each area of the company had their own strategy and how they were going to win in their particular chosen marketplace. So I would suggest in a situation like that, you'd have several strategies that feed into the main strategy. And the way that company looked at it is, I wish I could just steal their strategy because it was so good. But they had pillars, right? So, and their pillars of the company were the different things that were important to them. So their why was on these different pillars. They wanted to have, I guess you could have like ethical, you could have, whatever were your pillars that hold your company up, right? That's the way they looked at it. And each division had their own strategy that fed into the main strategy.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Okay, so if we don't have any other questions, I'm available here after for a few minutes, and then you have my contact information there on the QR code. So feel free to email me, reach out to my team, get on my website, set up a call if you have a question. If there's anything you forgot to ask while we were here, feel free to reach out later and ask me. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.